Welcome back to the Trojan Hour here on WIDU 99.7 FM, 1600 AM. We're sitting here now with John Guillermo, and he will be hosting or interviewing, shall I say, Dr. Sonny Kelly and Dr. David Nays from the communication program at FTTC. Okay, John, how are you this morning?
I'm doing well. I'm ready to get going. I'm gonna go with Mr. Nays, Dr. Nays, and Mr. Kelly. I've just been wondering, what do you guys do, and what is so important about what you guys do at FTCC?
Ooh, that's well, what we teach. First and foremost, we teach communication. So we are 2 of the 9 professors in the communication program, or instructor, and we teach 3 classes: Introduction to Interpersonal Communication, we call COM 120, Introduction to Intercultural Communication, COM 140, and Public Speaking, COM 231.
Can you go a bit more in depth of these classes, like DME 120? I know that's interpersonal, and DME 140 and public speaking classes. Like, what are the differences between these classes?
So, Dr. Kelly mentioned something in terms of COM 120 in a conversation earlier we were having, in terms of what does that class entail, and it's really about understanding and developing our communication with relationships with other people, whether they're one-on-one communication or one-on-one relationships, personal relationships, professional relationships, small group relationships, addressing conflicts, so on and so forth. And it's one of those classes that we believe is pertinent, or is actually truly relevant to not just what we do as students in an academic setting, but outside the classroom walls, what we do in our everyday lives, our professional lives, our personal lives, our family lives, our work lives, right? Formal, informal. So you learn a lot about the different elements of relationships and why it's so important to effectively communicate and listen and so on and so forth. And then with public speaking, would you say, Dr. Kelly, that's the one class, I've been doing this for 23 years now, that's the one class that the majority of students probably try to take at the end of their time,
right? Or not at all,
right? Or not at all, because a lot of people are afraid of public speaking, right? There's a joke that I use in my class that comedian Jerry Seinfeld used to say, that when it comes to public speaking, it's Americans' greatest fear, and death is number 2, right? He's like, death is number 2. So he's like, so apparently what that means is if you ever go to a funeral, apparently you're better off being in the casket than having to give the eulogy, right? So,
right.
So our job in that particular class, I think, is not just to be able to get students through that class with having to do the state required amount of speeches that you have to give, but more than anything, and we all take a little bit different approach to it, but like, for example, my approach is really just kind of assuring my students that it's trying to get them to find their voice by the end of the semester, by the end of the course. It's not just about being able to being a world-class public speaker at the end of the semester, because that's going to take time, but really finding your voice, being at least a little bit more comfortable in front of others, communicating your messages than you were when you started the course. That's really kind of the biggest thing.
Yeah,
would you say that's a
good point? Yeah, I would say so. As far as COM 120 goes, for me, that's always therapy. I learn more about myself. My students learn more about themselves and their relationships, and we always grow as people. When it comes to COM 231, public speaking, we all learn that we have a voice and we share it in creative ways. There are 4 speeches that are required. One of them is a ceremonial speech, so you may end up giving a eulogy. For all my funeral services students, I say, hey, this is a great chance to kind of start working your magic, so to speak, because many times there have been students who have come back to me and said, hey, I was working at a funeral service and the speaker wasn't there, so I was able to step up and do it. And I said, that's great. That's the kind of stuff we teach. It's very practical. And then the other class we teach is COM 140, which is intercultural communication, and that is really for those people who are ready and willing to deal with some of the differences that they're going to face in their workplace, in their communities, out in the world where people are from different cultures, different languages, backgrounds, ethnicities, etc. How do we kind of build bridges? How do we build bridges between people who have different understandings of the world? So that's a really challenging class to take, because you have to get out of your comfort zone in some ways, but it's very helpful because we're all going to be in a world, whether you're in a restaurant or a funeral home or in broadcasting, whatever, you're going to be in a world where you're dealing with people who see life differently than you. So how do you work through that and make sure you build bridges with them through your communication? So that's what COM 140 intercultural communication is about.
Yeah, and I think when we're talking about, there's clearly distinctions, as Dr. Kelly just mentioned, between each of those 3 courses, but I would say the common thread, the way I view it in terms of those 3 classes and kind of what we try to do as a department, the common theme across all of those different courses is that, I always tell my students that humans are storytelling animals, right? And the goal, more than anything, when it comes to just communication as a discipline, as a practice, as an art form, as a skill, however you want to describe it, is it's about not just finding your voice, but being able to tell your story with, to other people, so that they not just better understand it, but we have a better understanding and commonality with each other, whether that's giving a formal presentation in a public speaking class, whether it's sitting down one-on-one, having that conversation with a coworker or a romantic partner or a family member or a son, daughter, parent, whatever the case might be, or someone from a culture that you are not familiar with or they're not familiar with yours. It's all about not just finding that common ground, but really getting to the basic rudimentary foundations of this is what it means to be human. These are all the different stories we have to tell. Let's share those stories, right? And then go forward from there. And that's one of the common themes you're going to find in all of those courses.
And this is why everybody should take communication courses, because
Absolutely.
you're going to use it for the rest of your lives. And I always tell my students, if you don't learn something that you can use in the academic setting, whatever you learn here, you can certainly use at home. I mean, I have people coming back to me, and I'm sure you do as well, David, where they say, I tried this concept you taught me at home, and my relationship with my kids is better.
Yes.
I'm having fewer fights with my wife or my partner, and I'm finding better ways to navigate. I'm like, that's exactly it. We're making the world a better place, by communicating more clearly and with more love and thoughtfulness. That's what it comes down to.
You said thoughtfulness there, Dr. Kelly, and I think that kind of to add to that, those stories are like we share a lot of the same office space, and so we have, whenever a student comes in to see me or Dr. Kelly or some of our other colleagues, we're going to overhear those conversations occasionally, right? So we're hearing those examples. I love it so Dr. Kelly is like a really popular instructor when it comes to having student traffic in his office, which is fantastic, right? Like I think as an instructor, you always wish that more students would come take advantage of your office hours and come see you and just engage outside of class when the pressure's off, that so to speak. And so anyway, so you just, we hear each other's stories and our students' stories. And you talked about the idea of thoughtfulness. Students, I can't tell you how many stories since I've been at FTCC where, they're just coming in saying, we talked about this last week, and it's, oh my gosh, I did that, last night. And you said thoughtfulness, and I want to get to this point of, when we think about communication, about public speaking or interpersonal or intercultural, we assume, I think, oftentimes that means it's about us doing the talking. But I would argue, and Sonny, you probably agree, I don't want to speak for you, but listening is a huge skill that we teach, especially in interpersonal and public speaking. That's another common theme, that communicating isn't just about sending a message, it's about receiving a message as well. And that's one of the things I love hearing from my students more than anything. It's not just, hey, Dr. Nays, I tried this and it worked when I was saying this to so-and-so the other day. It's, I really understand better now about what it means to actively listen and not pseudo-listen and engage, and how much you can learn about somebody if you just sit and listen to their story instead of waiting for your turn to speak.
That's huge. Mindful listening is so important. We teach that expertly, and our students walk out of the course just better at communicating, at relating with other people, whether it's the workplace or personally. And I'll just say this, excuse me, when it comes to communication and the importance of listening, I always say this: an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, right? So whether it's anxiety or not listening well or not knowing how to deal with conflict, when we teach our students, we teach them how to prevent those fall on your face moments, those offend someone and cut the relationship off moments. Not conflict, not anxiety. You're going to face them. But we teach them how to dance with it and work with it and make it constructive and generative as opposed to destructive and silencing, right? The last thing we want to do is for you to be silenced. We want you to find your voice. We want you to tell your story. And then once you tell your story and I listen to it well, it becomes our story. Now we're doing better together, right? That's what we do.
Yeah, it's a shared experience.
Let me jump right in, guys. David, you have another question? I know the guys kind of...
Yeah. I was just wondering, we all know about like the communications, like how it's important, like talking to a boss, being that funeral kind of speech talker. But, what kind of careers do these lead to?
I'm glad that you said it. I will just say this. Every career you're ever in, you're going to have to talk to people. Even if you sit in front of a computer all day, you're going to have to pitch your idea.
Absolutely.
You're going to have to share it, whether email, text, or face-to-face. You're always going to be communicating, which means we have job security, right? In that sense. But what have you heard, David, in terms of your students?
Here's the way I kind of describe it to my students, too, because I get that question a lot. That's a really good question, John, is that there's no real limit. Like a lot of times you'll see, I'll see flyers occasionally, or I'll see posters like, hey, what can I do with a communication degree, right? And it's that question. I think that there's a bigger question that we're really trying to get at, and it's like, what are the skills that you can use, not just vocationally or career-wise or professionally, but if you are talking specifically about that, to what Dr. Kelly was just kind of describing, is that I look at it as most of our career paths are as professional public speakers. Like, for example, but we don't think about it in those terms. Like, let's say you're a teacher, right? Let's say you're a classroom teacher. Doesn't matter what level, whether you're college, like us, high school, grade school, whatever the case. Those are professional public speakers. That is their job, is to be they're professionals, and public speakers are in front of an audience communicating a message. If you're an attorney, you're a professional public speaker, or you're a professional communicator, right? So another way to think about it is, what different types of professions are we expected to be professional communicators? Can you think of any where that's not the case, Dr. Kelly?
I can. And here's the thing. What I also want to stress is the fact that we have faculty that are there to teach you who have a myriad of experiences and past lives, so to speak, that we can share. So, for example, for me, I'm an actor, I'm a performer, public speaker. I've also done sales. I've worked in nonprofit organizations. David, tell us a little bit about your background.
Yeah, so I'm a budding business owner, gym owner, and personal trainer as well in the fitness industry, and that's there's a lot of coaching that goes into that, and so it's not just about knowing the content and the expertise of that area, having that knowledge base. You got to know how to communicate it, right? You got to know how to effectively coach it so that people better understand it. Think about any profession or any walk of life where there might be something that you have to have explained to someone. The more difficult and more dense that information is, the best communicators are the ones that can take that really difficult information and break it down in a way that's easier to understand. So let's take, for example, let's say you're a teacher in a field that has nothing to do with communication as a discipline. Let's say you're a math teacher, right?
There you go.
You might be thinking, I have nothing to do with communication. You have everything to do with communication, right? The best math teachers in my experience, for example, if we're just talking about that subject, are the ones that can take something difficult. Like for me, math was very difficult. The best teachers I had weren't necessarily, they weren't the best math teachers or best science teachers or whatever, take any subject, because they knew the most about that subject. Is because they were the best ones at communicating it so that I could better understand it as a student.
They could tell a story. You turn everything into a story, right?
Absolutely.
Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, right? Learn the order of operations that way from a good math teacher who knew how to communicate.
And then you understand it and you can apply it, and then it's just those types of things, those shortcuts that you learn. So really, to answer your question, is just about every single walk of life is you're going to use these skills that you learn in these classes. And so there's a reason that these courses that we teach are required courses. Right? I mean, there's a reason that to get a college degree in America, for example, you got to have some communication course, whether it's public speaking or what have you. There's a reason for that, right? Because we know that the system knows it's a really, really vital skill that we all need to learn.
I see how that it can be super important to take this class, communications, what are some things that, younger kind of people can do to become better at speaking or events that will get you to be a better person at communicating all these and being a better person?
Yeah, well, I will tell you, Dr. Nays talked about the fact that it's all about storytelling, right? There's a theorist that calls us homo neurons, right? The humans who tell stories, who narrate. I say just learn your story. One thing that's, Bakim, you've taken my class, and anybody who's taken my class knows is that I want to pull the stories out of you first. So we write poetry, we write haikus, and at first it seems silly, what are you doing? Why are we doing this? Because I want you to know you have a voice and you have stories to tell. I always tell my students, the first thing you have to do in a presentation is hook us, get our attention. It can be through a statistic or a quote, but even better, tell us your story, and you have stories to tell. So when we learn how to tell our stories, that's how we start to engraft ourselves to other people, our stories with other people. Again, they become our stories. Once you get your audience on your side, they're all ears, and they'll listen. And if they know that you care, then they'll care about what you know. So that's what it is for me. Is the first thing that any public speaker should do is learn their story. And when it comes to interpersonal communication, the first thing you should do is learn why you are the way you are. How did you learn those patterns and those labels, etc.? Some of them are helpful, and some of them are challenging, and you never should have taken that on yourself, but somebody put that on you. They labeled it on you. They put you in that story when you were younger, and we can break free from that and find new stories and forge new paths.
Yeah, and I think, one of the reasons that I think a lot of students try to avoid taking public speaking, or just people in general are afraid of public speaking, or that there's a big reason that it's the people's number one fear, right? And there's two reasons for it. When we get nervous before having to communicate, whether it's giving a formal presentation in a class or a job interview or a presentation at work or radio interview or whatever the case might be, I always tell my students two things. You're nervous because, number one, you're human. Right? Humans get nervous when we have to communicate with other humans. We just do. And anyone who tells you that they're not nervous in that situation is lying to you, right? Now, we might be able to, take that nervousness and harness it in a positive way so we're not as nervous. We can minimize it, but it's a good thing to be nervous. That's why I always tell my students. So number one, it tells you you're human. And number two, you're nervous because you care.
Yeah.
You care about how your message is going to be received by others. Whether it's how you're going to, what's my grade going to be on this speech in this class, or how is my audience going to be looking at me, or not listening to me, or listening to me, or how is the interviewer, or my future boss who's interviewing me for this job, are they going to hire me, that type of thing. So it tells you that you care. And so I always tell my students, the moment you're not nervous, that's when something's wrong. So like I've been doing this for 23 years, and I've always said the moment I'm no longer nervous before I go teach a class, and I've probably given 15,000 presentations in my day.
Easily.
And I still get nervous. Not as nervous as I did 23 years ago, but I still get nervous. I still get those butterflies on day 1 of the semester. I still get butterflies on, week 16 of the semester, because I care about how my students are going to view me during that particular 45-minute session, hour and a half session, 2-hour class, whatever the case might be. So it's time for me to walk away the day that I walk into a classroom and I no longer am nervous, because that might tell me maybe it's just that impact isn't there, that those butterflies aren't there for a reason. Maybe I don't care quite as much, and it's maybe time for me to try something else. Fortunately, that hasn't happened yet. Hopefully that'll be there for another 20 years, but that's the thing. So just embracing the fact that nervousness, it's not about getting rid of those butterflies. It's about getting those butterflies lined up in V formation and working for you instead of working against you.
Let me jump in right quick. John, I want to piggyback off of your question if I can. What type of student would you guys say? I know everybody has to take a comm class, like you said, but in your experience, what type of student generally succeeds in your class?
I would say for me, there are 2 students that easily I know will succeed in my class. First, the charismatic kid who comes in and is already, or person comes in, they're already comfortable speaking because they're in sales already. They've already been doing this. And what I'm going to do for them is polish them. I'm not going to sit there and let you just sit back on your laurels. I always challenge you to get better. Okay, work the room now. All right, how are your PowerPoints? Let's take it to the next level. They're going to do fine as long as they'll put the work in. Now, I've had some students come in to be polished, but they're lazy. They just want to just kind of make stuff up as they go. They don't do so well. So if they have the work ethic, they'll be good to go. Then my students who are quiet, but they write a lot of poetry or they journal a lot, they've been thinking their stories through all this time. They just haven't shared it with anybody yet. They just need permission. So those students, once I see them and I see that they journal a lot or they draw a lot and they're very creative, I'm like, I cannot wait to watch you blossom. Because as soon as they get up and they feel the energy of being loved and witnessed and heard, it's addictive and they want to share every other time they get an opportunity.
Yeah, having that, our classroom becomes an outlet.
Yeah,
a platform that they never even realized that they had access to before, right? So I always try to tell my students, this is not a punishment. You don't have to take this course, right? You get to take this course. It's an opportunity, and I always tell my students too that, we always talk about how in America we cherish the First Amendment, right? The freedom of expression, the freedom of speech. And yet, isn't it ironic that the thing that we cherish the most, the freedom of speech, is also the thing we are most afraid of? Wow. Right? So there's that irony there. So it's about embracing it, having that outlet. And so to piggyback on Dr. Kelly's comment about students, some of my best students over the years are not necessarily the students who got the A in the class. Some of my best students are the ones that walk away with a C in the class or barely just kind of get across the finish line because of their starting point. Maybe they came into class absolutely deathly afraid of taking this particular course and they put in the work, right? And where they grew from, right? Like, so where they started was way down here, and they got to the C level, they got to that average range. But man, that growth, right, that they showed during that course, that's what really being a student is about. Whereas someone who's starting way up here doesn't, they can kind of plateau and kind of get by sometimes. Yeah. So some of the students that really succeed in my class are the ones that are, as Dr. Kelly said, are just given that opportunity to express, to tell their story in various ways, whether it's through speeches, essays, discussion boards, whatever the case might be.
That's a good point. And we're increasingly giving opportunities to students to do what we call a CTA, a critical thinking assignment, where they can actually do an infographic or they can do a podcast and find creative ways to turn their work in that's not just a speech or a paper.
Okay, due to time restraints, John, go ahead and give us one more question.
I just want to intrude a little bit. We're talking about all these classes and how it can help Like, what are some of the events that you guys want to get out there?
Thank you. I will say a big event that we want everyone to know about is Fayetteville Talks. It's something we started last year in the spring. It'll happen the last week of April, and it is a citywide speech competition. So any high school student who takes classes at Fayetteville Tech in COM 231 public speaking, whether they're high school connections or whether we go to them, because we also go to several of the high schools as instructors, or if they're just in one of the classes that's it's one of our designated 5H high school classes, whatever it is, if they're taking public speaking at Fayetteville Tech, what we do is we have a speech competition specifically for high school students, and we have the top speakers of all of the county come in and have a competition right here on campus at Fayetteville Tech. We have folks from Methodist, Fayetteville State, Fayetteville Tech, et cetera, and community members, and the top 5 speakers from the whole county get to come in and share their speeches, and that's a wonderful way to celebrate our speakers, our scholars, and bring community together. So Fayetteville Talks coming in late April. We're thinking about April 27th, but keep your eyes open. We'll have that competition going.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things too, in terms of like the events and things that we lead as a department, there's 9 of us in the department. So Dr. Kelly and I are 2 of the 9, and we have an incredibly talented department.
Yes.
There's 7 other colleagues that just are experts in this field and just really want to make sure that their students succeed and reach out to the community. So that the Fayetteville Talks was the brainchild of 2 of our other colleagues in the department. Our department chair, Dr. Ramphal, is the one that's really supporting that as well, making sure that gets the support that it needs so that we can do it every single spring semester, possibly every fall and spring. But we also have, Dr. Kelly, is really big in terms of some of the other talks that he does on campus as well. You just did one early February on love languages. You work with, you work with. He's reaching out to the community, doing other events as well.
Yeah, so I've done community conversations, et cetera, and professional development. Actually did something at Terry Sanford High School, a performance of a show called The Talk. I'm going to toot your horn, Dr. Nays, as we close out here. Dr. Nays is a baseball expert, an expert actually on Jackie Robinson and his legacy as an advocate as well as an athlete. And so he's got a book published about Jackie Robinson, but also he actually speaks out and shares about the legacy of Jackie Robinson in podcasts and in interviews and in workshops and symposia, et cetera. So keep an eye out. There are a lot of us. I'll just give a quick rundown. We've got James O.T. Sanders III, who's here with us. He's a great mentor coming from New York. So we've got all different kind of people we got Dr. Nays from Illinois. I'm from California. James from New York. We've got Rachel Rion, who is another great debate person who put together Fayetteville Talks. She's from Illinois. We've got Brenda Mitchell from the Midwest. She's a high school expert. And we've got Dr. Ramphal, who's from Guyana, and as well as Leslie Corpening and Kenny Smythe, 2 other instructors that are from this area, but just great expert knowledge in all these different areas. So plenty of opportunities for students to learn from people from all over the world with a lot of different expertise.
Yeah, and Katie Hunter is another one of our instructors, and she's our go-to instructor when it comes to teaching our classes at Fort Bragg.
Yes. So we get to Fort Bragg, and she's our expert in that.
Absolutely. So, and we are actually, me, Dr. Ramphal, and Dr. Kelly, we are going to be presenting at the National Institute of Staff and Organizational Development in Austin, Texas, Memorial Day weekend in May, on a presentation that we've taken the show on the road numerous times across our
guys,
campus.
we hate to cut you off. You guys can talk.
Absolutely.
That's what we're trained to do.
You're very intimidating guys.
We just had to give a shout out. We have a great team. We want to make sure we give a shout out to all of them. But
we like to thank Dr. Kelly and Dr. Nays for coming out today, and we like to thank John for providing us with some great questions out there. And that'll conclude today's show, and we look forward to seeing you again on the Trojan Hour here on WIDU 99.7 FM, 1600 AM.